Welcome back to Newsmax Now. I'm Miranda Kahn. Topping your headlines today, hundreds of people gathered for a memorial in Brussels to honor the victims of the terror attacks. Flowers were laid on the ground and people lit candles to show unity in the fight against extremism. The estranged wife of an internationally known pianist pleads not guilty in Texas to charges that she killed their young daughters. And Amazon.com says a review finds that women get equal pay to their male counterparts. The online retailer points to a recent survey showing that female workers earn 99.9 cents for every dollar earned by men in the same positions last year. And speaking of women, a couple of candidates, their wives are getting the spotlight today, but not necessarily in a good way. A super PAC called Make America Awesome, not a Trump supporting PAC, released a Facebook ad targeting Mormon men of voting age in Utah. It was a picture of Donald Trump's wife, Melania, and quite a revealing GQ magazine spread. Donald Trump, after seeing the ad featuring his wife's GQ magazine shoot, he fired at Ted Cruz, like we'd expect from Donald Trump, saying this: lying Ted Cruz just used a picture of Melania from a GQ shoot in his ad. Be careful, lying Ted, or I will spill the beans on your wife. Well, of course, Ted Cruz had to respond, and so he followed up with this tweet. Pic of your wife, not from us. Donald, if you try to attack Heidi, you're more of a coward than I thought. Hashtag classless. Trump sent out an amended tweet, because he has to have the last word. Lying Ted Cruz denied that he had anything to do with the GQ model photo post of Melania. That's why we call him Lying Ted. Ted Cruz responded today. It's just going to keep going back and forth. Responded today to the threat Donald Trump made about his wife, Heidi.
That speaks volumes about his willingness to go to the gutter at the drop of a hat. And part of the reason is Donald's not comfortable talking about policy.
And that's where we want to bring in today's roundtable. Joining us today, columnist at The Hill, Brent Budowsky, and the senior project manager at Hathaway Strategies, as well as former White House spokesperson for President George W. Bush, Pete Seat. Nice to have you gentlemen here. Did you two coordinate? You're both wearing blue.
Always.
Always. Well, good. Glad to know you guys are in touch with each other. All right. First off, let's start with you, Brent. Your reaction to this tweet war now about the wives and the super PAC releasing this ad showing this image of Melania. Is this really going to work?
No, it'll backfire against both of them. I deplore the idea of bringing the wives into it, or the husbands, if you ever get a women candidate like Hillary. I think these things ought to be kept above politics. I think the spouses should not be attacked. I think dirty tactics have gone too far. My column in The Hill tomorrow is titled Trump the Loser. And I may have to write one the following week that Ted's the loser, too. It's really unfortunate. They should both stop it. Leave the wives alone.
Pete.
Yeah, this says a lot about Donald Trump. He claims to be the sacred cow that shouldn't be touched, but he's really the paper tiger who's looking for any and every reason to lash out at his opponents. But it also highlights the slippery slope of super PACs, where you want the money, you want the ads, but inevitably they do things that campaigns regret. And I'm sure the Cruz campaign wishes they had some wiggle room right now and could send an email to these folks and say, knock it off, knuckleheads. You're not helping the cause. Why in the world did you do this? But of course, they're legally barred from doing that.
Yeah, I'm always curious, Brent. It seems like whenever anybody tries to go after Donald Trump, it usually works in his favor. So is this going to actually hurt Cruz?
Well, I think Cruz has a history of running dirty tactics in his campaigns. There's no doubt about it. That went all the way back to the Iowa caucus. So I think it will hurt Cruz. I think if Donald goes after Senator Cruz's wife, it'll hurt Donald. We need to have a politics of some decency and honor and civility and, heaven forbid, family values. And I do agree with the point about the super PACs. I think there is basically a lot more criminality of covert collusion than we know. I think this is a scandal waiting to happen. It is impossible to know, who is saying what to which super PAC. I think they would abolish the whole thing and reverse Citizens United. But to answer your question, I think anybody who attacks the wife of the other candidate will pay a price with voters, and they should.
Yeah, I also want to go back, though, to what Cruz said, that he thinks that Donald Trump is bringing this up because he's avoiding talking about policy. Is that the right way to go after Donald Trump? Pete?
Well, Donald Trump, you can't say that policy is his forte. You know, just read the transcript of the Washington Post editorial board interview he did the other day, and it is mind-boggling to try and follow him. There are non sequiturs and just confusion when he tries to talk about policy. So rather than take the high road, as Brent suggests, Donald Trump runs into the gutter, because that's what he knows. He knows attacks. He knows lashing out, and that's the type of rhetoric that gins up his supporters. So he continues to do it, and he looks for excuses to continue doing it.
Brent, I want to get your reaction. Earlier, we were talking to J.D. Hayworth and Pete Hoekstra about some of the recent endorsements that Cruz has received, and especially Jeb Bush. Is that going to help Cruz at all gain any more momentum in this race?
Well, to some degree, yes, I think it will. I will say that it must be the ultimate humiliation for the Bush family that Jeb Bush has to endorse Ted Cruz, somebody that neither Jeb nor the Bush family has a very high regard for. But I think it'll help. I think what you're getting is the establishment is so panicked that they're actually willing to accept Cruz, who they privately despise, to defeat Trump, who they despise and fear even more. And I agree, by the way, with the comment about the Washington Post interview, which is mentioned in my column tomorrow in The Hill about Trump the loser. The things that he said about NATO and about Vladimir Putin and Russia and China, that he doesn't want to get them angry because he's afraid of starting World War III, that is bizarre and strange stuff that guarantees if he's elected, they're going to think he's weak. It's incredible what is in that interview. Everybody should read the Dan Bowles piece in the Washington Post summarizing the tape about that whole interview as a whole.
All right, will do. But before we go, I want to ask you, Pete, really quickly. We only have 20 seconds because you did work for President George W. Bush. Is it humiliating for Bush to endorse Ted Cruz? Yes or no?
Well, politics breeds strange bedfellows. Lindsey Graham, Carly Fiorina, Jeb Bush, all endorsing Ted Cruz. Crazier things have happened.
Yeah, fair enough. Gentlemen, stick around. We still have much more to talk about here on Newsmax Now. Welcome back to Newsmax Now. Ted Cruz continues to come under fire for his comments about increasing surveillance in Muslim neighborhoods in light of the terror attacks in Brussels. Former director of the CIA and NSA General Michael Hayden thinks Ted Cruz's comments on increased surveillance could be dangerous.
We don't have radicalized communities in the United States. We have some radicalized individuals. We have it within our ability, however, to create radicalized communities, and we ought to take every step not to do that.
Hayden went on to say that our culture of assimilation keeps us safe. New York Police Department Commissioner Bill Bratton said Senator and presidential candidate Ted Cruz was out of line with comments that he made about a surveillance program that would target those Muslim neighborhoods.
I would remind the senator he lives in the United States of America. And the statements he made today is why he's not going to become president of this country, because we don't need a president that doesn't respect the values that form the foundation of this country.
And former New York City Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik, who you've seen also here on Newsmax, agrees with Bratton. Here he is on CNN today.
Bratton's right. We have, just as your other speaker said, we've got close to 1,000 police officers in New York City that are Muslim. They're out there protecting every community. This is more. This is a complete another issue we have to deal with, and that's the collection of intelligence.
Kerik says there are police patrols in all neighborhoods, not just Muslim neighborhoods. And that's where we want to welcome back today's roundtable. Columnist for The Hill, Brent Budowsky, and former White House spokesperson for President George W. Bush, Pete Seat. Brent, let's start with you. You were talking about foreign policy earlier. Do you think Cruz's comments will help or hurt his campaign?
Well, in a Republican primary, Lord only knows. In a general election, it will hurt. I agree with General Hayden. I agree with Commissioner Kerik and Commissioner Bratton. I think they were horrendous comments. The bigger problem, if I can be honest briefly about this, there are two things that we need to do that no one is talking about clearly. I've held these views for some time. One, we must have at least 20,000, 25,000 special forces to go in and kill ISIS. There's no way after 3,000 years of military history we can think we can win a war without ground troops. And I don't hear anybody except John McCain talking about that. And I think that's a terrible mistake. So I don't agree with almost any of the candidates that are unwilling to face that. And the other question, briefly, when the FBI challenged Apple Computer, I agree with the FBI on that. If we have the ability to get into the cell phones of known terrorists and find out who they are talking to, other terrorists, to go get them, arrest them, and execute them, we should. I don't hear any of the candidates talking about that. All this other stuff is borderline racism, exploitation, and a diversion from what I consider the most important issues, which are the two I just raised.
I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm going, wait a minute, you are a Democrat, right? Just joking. Just joking.
I'm a Kennedy Democrat on economic issues and social issues. I happen to agree with John McCain more often than not on killing ISIS and standing up to Vladimir Putin. I sincerely believe that what Trump said to the editorial page of the Washington Post yesterday was dead wrong. I think Cruz is in way over his head, and I will be bipartisan and honest. I was not overwhelmed by Hillary Clinton's speech today about terrorism, which was high on platitudes and weak on killing terrorists. I'm sad to say that, but that's my honest, no-spin point of view.
Well, obviously, these attacks, basically the primary and the caucus last night were overshadowed by the attacks last night, and more people are focusing on foreign policy. Pete, is Cruz trying to pivot? This is something that a lot of people have been talking about. Is Cruz trying to pivot in the direction of Donald Trump by calling for more surveillance, in your opinion?
It's not a smart move because he just strapped about 2,000 pounds of lead to any general election chances. We absolutely need to monitor potential terrorist activities, but we don't need to aggressively patrol neighborhoods of law-abiding individuals in this country. You know, one of the points that Ted Cruz made in a CBS News interview this morning was about low-income individuals and how that breeds crime. Well, he's correct, but Muslims in the United States are much more affluent than those in Europe who are migrants who went to Europe and in the vacuum may go to a life of crime or terrorism. That's not happening here. Sure, there are bad actors who happen to be Muslim, but that doesn't mean you put a black cloud above the entire community. That's ultimately what the terrorists want us to do, right? They want that type of rhetoric so they can use it in their propaganda, and Ted Cruz is playing directly into their hands by saying this and then doubling down on it.
And do you think that's going to hurt him moving forward?
I don't think it helps. I mean, it could get some people in the primary to give him more attention, but we've seen already that when you play Donald Trump's rhetorical game, which Marco Rubio did,
it works for him, but doesn't work for you.
Right, it doesn't help.
Right.
Exactly.
All right. Pete, Brent Budowsky, both of you, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts and insight with us. Straight ahead on Newsmax Now, if you went without health insurance last year, get ready to pay, a pretty hefty price for it. Some could be paying double. Newsmax health editor Nick Tate will join us next to explain. And Donald Trump, Sarah Palin, and Bernie Sanders, they're all coming up in today's edition of Headlines and Punchlines. You're watching Newsmax Now.